Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are across the globe. Welcome to Ancient Mysteries Unearthed. I'm Brandon James Sim, interviewing our content creator, Chris Noble. Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Brandon. So excited to chat about our topic today. We got Bigfoot, aka Sasquatch, aka many other names that we'll get into. This is a really fun one, and I know you have a lot to offer on this topic. So I think today we'll do a little switcheroo where I'm going to be interviewing you about your knowledge, and of course, I've got a little bit to contribute here, but you are the man with the knowledge, and I'd say a healthy obsession with Bigfoot, right?
Just an enthusiast, yes.
Yes, exactly. And Brandon and myself, we go camping quite a bit here in Canada, and we've had our own personal, I would say, experiences. Though it wasn't a conclusive visual sighting, we've had some really peculiar, bizarre situations pop up regarding a creature question mark of unknown origins and of unknown, well, whatever the heck it is. We've had some interesting brushes with creatures, let's just say, in nature that we'll also be sharing with you guys today, on top of some really compelling video footage of Sasquatch and some other folklore as well that we'll get into.
Yes, thank you so much, Chris. I'm an avid wilderness explorer. I tend to travel by canoe, is my preference, although hiking as well. But in Ontario, where I am situated, we have more lakes than the rest of the world combined, so you can really still get into some pretty good wilderness. Although there is human intervention almost everywhere, it does get quite remote in places. Uh, Chris and that's how we like to vacation. A lot of the times, we'll get my boat and we'll go away for a week or two at a time. I've had some serious nuggets of thought when I was in Temagami, especially. I was doing a portage, and it was a lost canoe route. So we were reestablishing a canoe route that was from the 80s, and we were looking for this portage. And so we usually leave the boat back, and we go with our bags on the first carry because it's a lot easier to navigate. And we ended up into a clearing. And it was weird that there was this clearing because every tree had been pushed over about, I would say, about maybe 2 feet up on the tree and bent over, literally bent over. And it was in a circle and it was perfectly situated. It seemed as if it was by design. And I got the heebie-jeebies right away. My trip partner at the time wanted to hang out and wait to see who was home. As to which I did, I got a bad feeling, and I went with my instinct, and I got out of there. And around the campfire, we were discussing it, and he had no idea about this Bigfoot lore. But one of the things that people talk about are tree breaks. So this is a way of maybe marking the territory, and it was bent over, not snapped, but literally bent over as if somebody had pushed it over in a perfect circle. So one of those situations like that where I'm like, this looks like a crop circle in the middle of the forest. What could have done this? There's no one back here. We're literally trying to carve out an old portage route. Gave me the heebie-jeebies. So it sparked a bit of an obsession. It got me into Bigfoot spiral, and here I am today. So much like a lot of things in life, and frankly, when people talk about ghosts of me, studying Shakespeare and ancient literature, ghosts are a pan phenomenon. So they're pan cultural. They're talked about in almost every situation. So Bigfoot is very similar, actually. A lot of people think of Bigfoot as a North American phenomenon, but if you just scratch the surface, you don't have to go far before you find tales of the Yeti in Nepal and the Himalayas. So the other thing about it is, as we have different races of humans around the world with slight characteristics that are slightly different, we also find that in the wild men. And I say the wild men because that seems to be the common denominator, is that they're considered a man and they're considered wild. So the Yeti in particular seems a little more ape-like than others, but we're going to dive into some serious conversation here and have some fun with it. So once again, we are enthusiasts. I come at this from a screenwriting and acting point of view, and I love the stories, and it's just, you don't have to go far to find great ones. So in North America, we have the idea of Sasquatch. Okay, and Sasquatch is a kind of a hybrid term from a West Coast Native American, Native Canadian term. I believe it was Sasqui or something like that. I'm sure there will be a comment correcting me because I can't say that I have the correct pronunciation, but we basically changed it to Sasquatch today. But Bigfoot, uh, where the term Bigfoot came from was actually when they were starting to carve out roads into the Rockies in California. There was a construction site one day, and the gentleman came back and tires, and I'm talking like big tires, the kind that aren't inflated, but the kind that are on bulldozers and stuff were thrown around. The site had been kind of tampered with in a way that no one really knew. You almost needed that machinery to tamper with it, although they had the keys. And there were these prints left behind, and it made the newspaper. And they said there was these big feet. So whoever left this big foot, and that's where we get the term Bigfoot. Um, I would say that so we have Sasquatch in North America. We have the skunk ape actually in Florida. This is more of like a swamp dwelling one, almost more like it seems to be more almost like a Yeti. It's more gorilla type in nature. I believe there is one in South America, but for sure we have the Yeren from Chinese lore. Okay. We have the Yowie from the peoples of the Australian region. Um, and then we have comments of things like the Almas, more in the bordering above the Middle East into those mountain ranges there, going to Mongolian culture and some Russian culture as well. So
I want to
interesting.
back up for a quick
Yeah.
second, Brandon. We just did our last episode on giants, and
Mhm.
as a quick thing, I want to let our audience know we got some really great comments on that episode. It's our most popular so far, and there was a couple of people telling us that there was some alternative information. So I just want to throw in, please let us know if you guys have different information than the stuff that we're presenting. Please let us know in the comments. This is how we can all learn together. The internet is a pretty crazy place, and it's really hard to know sometimes what is legit and what is not. So we love hearing people that are actually calling us out on some potentially fake or forged type of videos or information that's just incorrect. Let us know. And what I wanted to do is just stopping you there, Brandon, is I would love to ask, what's the difference between a giant and the Bigfoot, aka Sasquatch?
Interesting question. A lot of the lore actually will line up. There are tales of giants being cannibalistic towards humans. There are also tales of some Sasquatch, Bigfoot tribes being cannibalistic as well, stealing away women from camps, children as well. Seems more like women are for mates, and children that might just be a maternal fascination, or it could be for consumption. The difference would be is that giants are more in tune with our philosophy of our style of life. So they're more based in society. They have material items. They are not wild in the same sense. They might be wilder than us because there are tales of them living in caves and whatnot. But giants seem to have craftsmanship. They seem to have more humanistic qualities to their approach to living their life. Whereas Bigfoot is a wild man, so they are more in tune with nature. They seem to have all of their skills seem to mainly come from what they're given by nature. So their fishing and their hunting are going to come with natural abilities. What those are, of course, when we get into Bigfoot, there is the paranormal, there's the extraterrestrial, and then there's the natural. So those seem to be the three the three factions of Bigfoot research and I'll say processing. So as we try and process the Bigfoot lore, because the one thing that you can't deny is that the Bigfoot lore exists. Whether you believe in Bigfoot or not, it's much like ghosts, much like UFOs. The sightings keep rolling in, and we're talking thousands upon thousands a year. Globally, probably up into the 10,000. Like they just keep coming in. So whether you believe it in or not doesn't mean that the phenomenon doesn't exist.
Exactly.
So some people believe that it's an extraterrestrial, that it was put on this earth maybe before humans and that it was here. Some people believe that the Anunnaki, you keep hearing that come back. And if you have any interest into that, look into Zachariah Stitchin's work. But yeah, the Anunnaki used a race that was here with their own DNA to create something that was fit for this world, which would have been us. Okay, so that's another theory I hear.
We'll do another
S-
whole episode on that because that's for those listening too. You can just go back into the ancient Sumerian clay tablets and learn a lot about that. That's a whole other story. But it's really good. I'm glad we're going through this, Brandon, because there's some really incredible. A lot of people ask. One of the biggest things usually is where's all the evidence of the Bigfoot, of the Sasquatch? Why don't we see enough images of they're so big and so obviously, you know, would stick out most likely? Well, I'd love to hear from you, Brandon, because I've heard a lot of things of when you just mentioned the paranormal. They've got some pretty incredible abilities to potentially even phase shift out of this dimension. And I've heard this also coming from different extraterrestrials that have this ability as well. Phase shifting, which just means it's shifting the frequency of all your subatomic particles, which is obviously incredible that you can do that. But it's possible scientifically to do this. Military think they look into this as a cloaking mechanism. So phase shifting out of this dimension is one way that the Sasquatch or Bigfoot are so impossible to see. Some if they don't want you to see them, what I've heard as well, and a lot of this lore is that they don't want you to see them, that you won't see them. But sometimes they want you to see them because there's still some form of a connection that they do want to have with us, even though I've also heard that they're very much stewards of the land and are extremely in touch with our planet in ways that we still have either forgotten and are just completely unaware of. And they're scared of us, they're wary of us, and some maybe more than others, and sometimes they do want to have some form of an interface with us, which is why you do see them sometimes. And we have videos that we're going to show you towards the end of the episode that will show at least that there's some pretty solid video evidence out there of these guys existing. But I want to back up 2 seconds because there was an experience Brandon and myself had together. I remember this when we were camping, and this is another one of the many pieces of evidence, or at least the signs that you might be interacting with Bigfoot, is the smell. And we didn't see anything, but we smelled what we would consider a wet dog. Wet dog smell is one of the other examples of that you might be around a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot. Can you go into that a bit, Brandon? Because that was pretty profound experience for myself.
Yeah, so it does go back into this kind of this cloaking hypothesis. So wet dog seems to be they don't smell good. Much like a bear doesn't smell good. When you live outside and you're often wet and you're consuming dead flesh, you can only imagine that might get into your hair. It doesn't smell good. That seems to be a common denominator that perhaps the hygiene well, it's not human, so it doesn't smell good. So yeah, so we were on a trip and we kept through periodically we kept having almost like walking into these wafts of wet dog, which was very interesting because there was no rhyme or reason to why we kept having this sensation. So yes, you do get this smell that is characteristic of them. And once again, I like to go back to the ancients. So when I hear people talk about it, I think, well, this is great new research. But once again, what are the ancients saying? So the ancient First Nation tribes would talk about, and those people would talk about them being shadow walkers. So they exist between two worlds, which once again we are starting to see this correlation between what we are trying to use our science to and what the lore is. So a lot of times you'll see footprints going off and they disappear randomly. So for us to pick up whiffs of a wet dog, I mean, there could be 1,000 explanations. However, of course, you get two wilderness enthusiasts who have done a bit of research on Bigfoot, and all of a sudden you're wondering, is there something around us? Is there something watching us? And we were in some deep wilderness at the time, so it's certainly possible. So yeah, the idea of them that's the whole thing, Chris, is that the idea of them having powers, people talk about them having kinetic powers as well, being able to paralyze prey. People have seen deer absolutely paralyzed. Hunters have talked about usually when people see a Bigfoot, rarely do they actually have control over their body. Oftentimes, there's a paralysis that enables them to um, to be able to do anything, to act. You're just a silent witness a lot of the time. And then this thing might come and steal your fish or hop over your chain link fence and steal a chicken or a sheep or a goat and run away. And certainly there are people who talk about habituation, where the Bigfoot live on site. You hear that a lot about in America. And the funny thing about these stories is that they're not necessarily so far away from civilization. We hear about them living behind grocery stores and living behind, like, if there's a little bit of woods, I'm 10 minutes out of town, I think I have a Bigfoot living in my backyard. The interesting thing is, how could that be? How could that be if they don't have some sort of other ability? So they're either very elusive, which we know they are very elusive. However, if there's a extraterrestrial or supernatural element to them that, you know, I don't always get into that, because that sparks a huge discussion of the blah, 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 blah from any skeptic. It's hard to talk to my father about, I think Bigfoot might exist. He's like, well, maybe it's undiscovered. And then you're like, yeah, and it walks in between worlds. He's like, okay, I'm done here. And he
Yeah.
walks away, right?
And I think this is where we really enjoy talking on this show, because we really don't, and this is why we love you guys to comment, and if anything, just to give us all these perspectives, because we don't claim to have any of the answers here, but we definitely want to bring up the stories and the information that we do know, or at least that we've come across, just to see what other people are thinking. And we know that we're not the only nerds out here that are really interested in this stuff, because I think it would be just as foolish to rule out the fact that they could have these supernatural abilities, these psychic abilities, these interdimensional abilities to phase shift in and out of this reality. I think it would be almost just as scientifically wrong for us to discredit that possibility as much as it would be to give that possibility all of the support in terms of our conclusions here. We're not saying that they are that, but we're definitely not saying that they're not that, because we just don't have enough information. I've also heard some really interesting whistleblowers from different military and government projects that were trying to track and capture the Bigfoot and Sasquatch. And I always got to wonder, now, of course, can you verify this? This is whistleblowers, right? But when you hear enough of them speak about certain things and patterns come up and they're completely unconnected from one another, you do have to at least ask the question, is there something to that? Because it seems not only have they tried and failed to capture certain Sasquatch or Bigfoot, but they've also succeeded in some ways and are doing God knows what to them, learning from them. And if they didn't have any validity as a pretty incredible creature, then why would the military even be interested in them? It's kind of the same thing as the giants that we were talking about last time. And if there's abilities that these creatures possess, of course, you can only imagine that the military would want to get their hands on it first before anybody else.
Well, so speaking of military, and we're gonna go into some of the evidence here. So, if you look at, there's the Washington State Military Guide. I don't have the link up, but please do research this. There is a Washington State Military Handbook. Okay, and it goes through all the plants and the animals, the topography of the area. All right, and in there, listed as one of the animals in the Washington wilderness. Washington is not the city, but the state above California, below BC. We're talking right into that area where the highest concentration of sightings are. Surprisingly, there's actually a lot in the East Coast as well. But they have a full page dealing with Sasquatch, and it talks about it and describes a bit about that, so that soldiers in the wilderness, if they ever come across this thing, aren't baffled, right? Because you can't have your soldiers completely unaware. And people say it's in there for jest, but I do believe that it is in there to prepare them just in case. Much like we talked about with the giants, how they went through this training exercise to shoot higher than a human. And they're all like, why are we shooting above the heads? Well, it was that training came into practice if, when you encounter, say, a giant. So,
What's the name of that again? This article? This
yeah, so it's the wilderness. It's the Washington State. It was a military wilderness guide. So I'm not sure when I Google it. Yeah, there's some different things about it, but you can definitely find it with some poking around if you look up Sasquatch, military Washington State, field guide or handbook. You will find it, and it is there. And you can read the insert. It's great. It's from, I think, the 70s, I think. Um, So not only that, but we also hear stories about firefighters fighting forest fires, and having the all the hair is burned off. This big man they find, right? This big man, they bring him in, and then apparently, they do some work on him. They're like, this is not a man. The body, even this is not a man's body, and it always gets suppressed. So as an actor, it's funny. I have a very good friend of mine. He's an actor, and he's now he wants to come on my trips because he's got the Bigfoot bug, and it seems to be a bug because this doesn't go away. There's too much to it. And he's like, look, I listened to this I listened to Sasquatch Chronicles. Great podcast, by the way. Check it out. And he's like, all these interviewers, like some people are going to be full of BS. Like you're just like us, some of the evidence that we might even show you might not be real. It's hard to decipher this, but his mind, he's like, look, I've been studying acting my whole life. Okay. These people are giving Oscar winning performances about their experiences. And I just don't believe that the everyday man has the gusto inside of him to give this eyewitness account. And I thought about that. I was like, what a great point. That why do we just assume that every hillbilly in the world who calls into these Bigfoot shows is Daniel Day-Lewis? You hear the emotion behind his voice when he's like, and then I shot the Bigfoot, and then I shot the baby Bigfoot, and then I was like, what did I do? And I freaked out and I went to town, I buried him, and then I came back and it was gone. And then,
And the stories I hear too are so elaborate. This goes well out of just Bigfoot and Sasquatch. This is some of the stuff that we hear about for all these topics that we go over on the show here, which is it's the detail, it's the level of detail that these people can give. And I get more suspicious when there's not a lot of detail in some of these stories and it's too general. I'm like, well then okay, that's becoming more easy to fake. But it's the detail, the level of detail, the weird, peculiar details that they give sometimes that you just would never think of even putting into a story. So that's always what stands out. And then, of course, like you just mentioned, it's the emotion, it's the feeling behind that. Like, how can you decipher when people are telling the truth? It's how you feel more than anything. You can always fact check this stuff, but facts change, information changes. But the way you feel when you hear this from certain people, especially I get this with a lot of people that have been claimed to be abducted by aliens or have had incredible encounters that just defy logic, or at least our version of logic here, and you hear their emotion and you hear how either distressed or anxious or excited that they were experiencing this, and you can feel it. And I'm sure with a lot of these accounts too with Bigfoot, it's the same thing. These people, they experience something really, really profound, and you can feel it in their testimony. Sometimes you can't, and that's where you gotta have to have your meter, your BS meter, basically. And so we're just doing the best we can on this show. And we got some videos that I would like to pull up soon, unless you got some more stuff you want to mention, Brandon,
yeah.
before we get into the videos.
So why don't I segue? What evidence do we have? There's a great presenter, rest in peace. His name is Lloyd Pye. And everyone should, who's listening to this, if you're interested in Bigfoot, the most interesting take I've ever heard on Bigfoot is Lloyd Pye's. His presentation is called "Everything You Know Is Wrong." You can find it on YouTube. It's over an hour long. His big thing, at the end of it, he'll get into the Anunnaki and kind of more of an extraterrestrial idea, but the beginning of it is so profound. What evidence do we have of Bigfoot? Why is there no fossil evidence of Bigfoot? Well, some people say there's a Gigantopithecus, right, which is a massive ape. We have like a thumb bone of them or something like that, and that's enough that they can conclude this is a big animal. But we have the pre-human skeletons. So we have Homo erectus, Homo habilis, we have the Neanderthals. There are all these beautiful bones left behind. And what he was saying, and it's so true, is that we try and humanize these bones. So their shoulders are different. The length of their arms are different. So they're jacking their arms up into basically right into their head to try and make the arm look like it's not dangling down at the knees. All of these skulls are more ape-like than us. And all of a sudden we just got these little tiny eyes and this little tiny forehead, and our jaw is way wimpier. And I don't see why having a big, strong jaw is a bad thing, or like some of these primal attributes. Why wouldn't we hold on to these amazing things? Like, why would we lose that? So he goes on to say, like, and he not only says that, but he brings into the point of like the Neanderthal skull matches up with the tails of the Almas. Okay, and we'll get into that a little bit later if we have time. he talks about Homo erectus being much taller, thinking that is a Bigfoot skeleton. So I believe we have a story of so the Yaren is the Bigfoot of China, and there was a woman who said that that she had an encounter with a Bigfoot, and the Bigfoot, as the native stories talk about, tried to take her as his wife, and made a baby with her. And there's actually a video of her son. And if you look at this guy and with the story that she has, I mean, she's not saying that she gave birth to a son with a gigantic defect. She's That's not her story. Her story is that a wild man took her away and that this is the result of it. So, yeah, if you have a little clip of them and if you can just see his face, like clearly, um, this he almost looks human, but there's definitely something wrong. And just the sheer size of this man is just it's just uncanny to think that this is normal.
So I'm going to play
So
this here for those listening who aren't seeing it. We're going to talk over this. There's no audio on the, well, we're not going to have the audio on the video. We're just going to watch this and we'll describe it to you guys for those of you listening. But pay attention for those watching too. I mean, this is not a deformity. This is a very different looking human being altogether. I would love to know the DNA structure of this person here.
yes, and so he lacked the ability to really speak. He wasn't normal. Sorry for the poor quality, but it's old footage. If you'll see like this, see how he's running. He's almost running wild. And
Yeah,
once again, this is the woman here, not very big at all. And look how big he is. He's almost as big as her, and he's sitting down. So
let's
you
back
can
that up
see
right
that
here.
the skull. You can see the skull. You can see the length of it. He didn't like to wear clothing. The elements apparently didn't bother him. He had all these traits to him that would make him more wild. So that's probably good for that, Chris. Um, so getting into it, it's funny when we see these videos that are around, and here's the other thing too. There's a lot of Bigfoot fakes out there. It's just something people do. They want to put a gorilla suit on, run around the woods. I'm surprised more people don't get shot because even when I'm camping, I have to wear my hunter orange in
It's so
fall
true
because
though.
there's guys with guns back there. So, but back in the day, so after the Bigfoot phenomenon, there was yeah, Robert Patterson and well, the Patterson Gimlin. I forget their first names, but they're the OGs of this Bigfoot video, and that's where you have that look behind. Look, they call it Patty. If you want to cue that up, we're going to talk about this for a quick second. So this is old footage from the 60s or 70s. And these guys, it's I mean, it is their story is almost too good to be real because they were like, we're going to go look for Bigfoot, and they found Bigfoot. But they were packing with horses through the mountains. This is California way back in the day. California's yes. So as we can see, they caught this. Now what you're not seeing is them catching up to this creature. The footage. This has been stabilized, by the way, hence why it's not moving. But the idea behind this is that it's hard to be faked. First of all, these guys were way back in the wilderness. Second of all, Hollywood doesn't really have an ape suit that good. Third of all, when they did research on this, they found there was twitching of the muscles, specifically the calf, and the knees don't bend the same way. So we can see muscles twitching. We can see that the coat is glistening in the sun. There is no neck, the conical head. Okay, and then here's the kicker: the thing's got breasts. So to go through all of this and then put breasts on it that are swaying as she's walking. Um, just so interesting. There's so many intricacies for this. And people have said they've explained this video away, but for every person who said nay, there's 10 people who say yay because it's just so compelling. And
One of
that's what
one of the things that always stands out to me with these is that it's the muscles. Like you said, you can see the breasts, I can see the shoulder blades in the back moving with the rest. I mean, once again, if this is a suit from 1967, it's far beyond what Hollywood was able to do, and it just goes again to like, why are we so adamant to always write it off as a hoax? We're always leaning to the hoax direction. I'm all about trying to have that healthy skepticism and balance. Balance is key with everything. But my God, why is it always we're teetering on the side of hoax? When to me, I'm like, especially this footage is very, very compelling. I mean, look at this. Like even the buttocks, like the way the legs are moving with the muscles. It's just
so
quite
Chris,
sophisticated.
people try and explain this stuff away, but it keeps coming back. Once again, I just say you can say there's no Bigfoot, but there will still continue to be Bigfoot sightings. That's just the way it goes. So here in Ontario, there's a town about 5 hours north, maybe six of me here. It's called Cobalt, Cobalt. It was a mining town. Okay, um, in Canada. Now there was trains that went there and buses, and there kept being these sightings throughout time of this guy they called Old Yellow Top. It was a wild man with blonde hair on top of him, and same thing, conical skull, built like a house. Wow, we're already running out of time. There's so much to
I
talk about with this.
know, I know. I
This
was
might have to
thinking
be a
that too.
two-parter. We
We
might
might
have to
have.
do a
You know
two-parter,
what? Let's
Chris.
make it a two-parter right now. I'm
It's too
feeling
much. I'm just scratching the surface, and we're out of time.
that.
So Old Yellow Top, yeah. So a bunch of Canadian papers picked this up about they called it a monster, and it harassed this mining town forever. And that's there's more evidence of this of Old Yellow Top. He kept coming back, and there was decades between sightings, but he kept coming back. So very very interesting, compelling stuff with this. Once again, you can't get away from this. You
Can
can
we
say it
go?
doesn't
Can we
exist.
play the Sorry to interrupt you, just because we do only have a little
Yeah,
bit
of
of time left
course.
in our episode here, and we're gonna do a part two for everyone listening. So stay tuned. That'll be the next episode coming up. Will be another Bigfoot Sasquatch one because there is so much. Our Brandon James Sim here's got so much
It's a
great
hot show.
information. It's a hot show, guys. So I want to play this audio clip for those of you who are just listening. This will be your real juicy bit of
Yeah, so this is the
evidence here. Let's get
Sierra
into that.
Sounds. Once again, this is in California. A couple of gentlemen took some recording devices and went into the woods, hid in a tree stump, and covered it up with some bark and everything, and just let that audio play. So this is what they ended up getting. Oh,
I got to
and
put the
Chris is
audio
muting
on. Sorry,
himself.
I was on mute. Hold on, folks.
Technical
We got technical
difficulty.
difficulties.
But yeah, the Sierra sounds are very compelling. They've been kind of mentioned to have almost a Japanese sound to them. And once again, it leads towards this them being another race of man, as lore says, because it sounds like they have a language. It's not;
Let's
these are
check
not
this out.
grunts and groans.
I've heard some people do analysis on this too, so let's check it out and we'll chat more.
Right there, just see moving right through there.
I'm going to stop that right there. That
Yeah.
sounds like a
So
language at the end for sure.
yeah,
At the
and if you
beginning, it
listen,
could be like a crazy dog almost. It was chewing on something and trying to move around a lot. Like it's got a little bit of that, but it's not a dog. You can also tell that. But at the end there, that sounded almost like a language.
yeah. So I've had my own audio experience, and we were along the French River in Canada in April. Okay, and we are on can be on some crown land. And Chris, how much time do we have left here?
Got just 6 minutes.
Okay, great. So yeah, we are camping on crown land, and so it's free for Canadian citizens to camp on crown land. And it's funny that my tripping partner, his wife called, and she said that the police called her, and we were like, oh, okay, how'd the police call you? And they were asking about us, and they were saying, I just want to make sure your husband's safe. It's just that people don't go in there this time of year, which was a very interesting thing. Um, Now this is kind of during the COVID era, and like going outside apparently is this like evil thing. So maybe it had to do with that. Maybe there's still some hesitancy about people enjoying their life at that time. However, what we experienced on one of our campsites was just beyond me. So I was setting up my hammock. I sleep in a Hennessy hammock, to plug them. Thank you so much for your great product. But yeah, I was setting up my hammock in the back, and I heard this deep roar. Now, like a roar, and it was right in my chest. Now, I've been a tree planter. I've spent a lot of time outside. I've heard bears. It wasn't a bear. They say there's no mountain lions out in Ontario, but I'm sure there is. Once again, it didn't sound like a cat. Uh, I couldn't explain it. It was to the point where we had our canoe on the peninsula, we had our bear spray, all of our knives, and we were just sitting there relaxing, listening to this just scary sound. And it to the point of where we're like, do we go looking for this sound because it's so compelling and scary, but do we go looking for it? And once again, I don't want to have my head turned around 6 ways from the sheer power of this beast or whatever it may have been.
That's
But
how every good movie, gets into the dicey scenes usually. And
right.
come on, we know how that story usually goes.
Yeah. So, and we had no idea about this police report until afterwards. So, because we were out of cell range. And so luckily it subsided because I would have hated it for it to persist into the night, but it persisted for hours. Every 3 minutes or so, we would hear another just roar throughout. Like this was the boss. That's the like he was the boss or she was the boss, whatever it was the boss. So audio sounds are very consistent, and I've seen videos in Ontario of Sasquatch sounds that are the closest thing to what I've heard, and they're reported to be master mimickers, so they can actually mimic humans,
I've heard the same. Yeah.
mimic birds,
They're dogs
mimic
sometimes. Yeah.
dogs, absolutely, and yeah, a bit of a trickster element to them for sure. Because, and why wouldn't they, right? Even hearing that language, a lot of grunts, moans, guttural noises, very,
Let's just
very
play.
primal.
I'm gonna want to play like 20 more seconds of that just
Sure.
while we're talking. Let's keep the mood here.
So yeah, sounds like a language,
Right?
but primal, animalistic in a way.
Now, I've also, like you've said, I've heard different sounding Sasquatch potentially sounds of like more like a ooh, like a lower.
So that would be closer to what we don't have it queued up now, but maybe in part two we can start with the sound of the Ontario sounds, just to give the audience an idea. This is the closest I have. Now, once again, just like every human is different, I imagine every Sasquatch has a different vocal range,
and
and
and I
pitch.
would say the intention. So it's like, are Sasquatch dangerous? Are humans dangerous? Let's ask the same question.
Well,
You're of course we are as a species very dangerous. Individually, we're usually pretty all right. What I would say, it would be the same kind of question. Are there? I'm sure there are many benevolent Sasquatch, and I'm sure there are also some not so, some more malevolent Sasquatch. And I've heard that sometimes the way to discern the difference, other than the obvious actions and intentions of these creatures, is the eyes.
yeah,
Some of the
glowing
eyes,
red.
the red eyes are malevolent, which I guess makes sense. And it would be creepy as all hell to see that. But then I've heard some really incredible encounters we can maybe talk about in the next episode where they've had the most beautiful, peaceful, and compassionate, kind, and loving encounters with Sasquatch, where when some of these people saw their eyes were just filled with love and compassion. And it was a beautiful encounter, the opposite of scary. So, like anything in life, it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag. It's nothing's ever black or white. That's for
Right. Gray at best option. So you know what, Chris? Why don't we end it there?
yeah.
We'll come back for a part two of this because apparently it's a hot show, everyone. I'm just going to give a shout out at the end here to one of our listeners. I hope he's a subscriber, Jerry Curl, for requesting me to come on camera, and I brought my best Jerry Curl for you, sir. So thank you so much for all your support, everyone, and commenting. We're starting to see more people getting involved. We love that. Please joke around with us, have fun with us, ask questions. We will try and get to as many of you as we can. All right. Chris, thank you so much for a great show. For only 33 cents a day, you can be a Ancient Mysteries Unearthed community member supporting our great content provider here. Chris is trying to go on more expeditions, find more ancient anomalies, open up a lot of opportunities for you and a lot of great insider benefits as well. And I will just say to everyone, thank you so much, Chris. Any last thoughts?
Yeah, just stay curious, everybody. Thanks again for listening. And most of all, thank you for commenting. Your information and your thoughts are so valued and really important to the show. So keep them coming. If you've got ideas for episodes as well, let us know. Thank you so much. Thank you, Brandon, for everything. Looking forward to part 2